Super Bowl 50 is in the books. We have so much to talk about, not just the NFL in terms of the Broncos and the Panthers, Cam Newton, Peyton Manning, but of course we got to talk about our Detroit Lions, Calvin Johnson. Some news hit just as I was recording the last podcast, so we'll give our spiel on that. There's been a ton of hate for the Detroit Lions as a whole, specifically toward our quarterback. We have to address that and much more, so stay tuned for the show. It is the Hindsight 20 podcast. I am your host, Jerry Mallory. I want to thank each and every one of you for listening. We're going to start this show off with a little bit of Sam Spence with one of his epic songs, because he has a ton of them. This one entitled Classic Battle. If you're a fan of the NFL, if you're a fan of sports in general, maybe if you're not even a huge fan, those songs from Sam Spence, such as that one, Classic Battle, and so many other ones are synonymous with the struggle, with the victory, with the defeat, the pain, blood, sweat, and tears, everything associated with football. Sam Spence, who just passed away recently, and this is why we're going to be playing some Sam Spence tunes today in honor of him. They all pretty much encompass what Sam Spence wanted to accomplish, and that was the spirit of the NFL. And hey, many of us slash all of us are on the outside looking in when it comes to the NFL. But if we're spectators, or if we played high school football, some of us college, maybe you're just in a flag football league, you know the camaraderie and the pain and the struggle, albeit on a lesser scale, that comes with playing football. And those songs that he had, those songs pretty much encompassed all of those emotions, all of those feelings. I mean, as a youngin' coming up, you know, you hear these songs, you think of the frozen tundra, you think of the Raiders, and they still hold up to this day. Songs that were made decades ago, they still have that feeling of football. And, you know, as the decades progress and we have new things for Monday Night Football and things for ESPN, things constantly change. But when you think of the NFL and you think of music, there has been one constant, in my opinion at least, and that has been the classics that we've heard from Sam Spence, a visionary, someone that stood the test of time with his music, and I would say he's encompassed a sport with his musical composition as well as anyone that has ever done it. So salute to him and his family, and although he's no longer here, we already know the music will remain forever. Okay, guys, now that we talked about Sam, gave him his propers, Super Bowl 50 is in the books. You know, I was kind of rooting for Cam and the Panthers. Then part of me was like, you know, quite honestly, if it's not the Detroit Lions, I have to pick and choose why I have a rooting interest. Okay, most of the times when it's a rooting interest, it's still about the Lions. Like, okay, I need this team to lose because maybe they're in the NFC. Certainly if they're a divisional foe, I want them to lose because it helps the Lions. Or it could even be draft positioning. Most games for me, for football, always circles back to our beloved Detroit Lions. Well, this game is different. You know, we're out of the race, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess I was slightly cheering for Carolina. But when I would talk to my buddies, or there is a workmate or someone that lives in the complex that I'm in, and they say, hey, Jerry, who you got for the Super Bowl? It was always this. I'm rooting for Cam and the Panthers. They're young. They're up and coming. You know, I like how they built their team, really through the draft, not a ton of free agent signings. They've built their team really solidly. But although that's who I'm rooting for, who I think will win, I was giving the edge to the Broncos. You look at that defense, and you look specifically at Von Miller, and you look at the guy who, you know, he looked like he was on his last leg, DeMarcus Ware with the Cowboys. All of a sudden, this man regaining his form. You've seen it time and time again with defenses being successful in the Super Bowl. And so I said, you know what? Rooting for the Panthers, I think the Broncos will win it. I think they're going to take it. I think the pass rush will be too much. And then you kind of start, rooting for your prediction. At least I do. Especially if I don't have a huge rooting interest, I'll start to root for my prediction. And so part of me wanting the Panthers to win, the other part saying, hey, I want to look like I kind of know what I'm talking about. So if the Broncos win, especially because of the front seven, then yeah, that's cool too. And that's exactly what happened. We all know how it went down. And unfortunately, part of the story will not just be the Panthers losing, but Cam Newton, how he responded after the game, the infamous fumble that he really didn't go after. Let's talk about all of that before we get back into our Detroit Lions. I know you've heard the clips. I don't have the best sound audio for Cam Newton's post-game interview, but I do have it right here. Let's take a listen to Cam Newton. Very, very upset to say the least, but did he handle it the right way? Did he handle it in a mature way? A guy that's supposed to be the leader of that team and potentially the face of the NFL. Let's take a listen as Cam Newton, this is right after the game, in the big, huge media thing that they had. There's a bunch of other interviews going on, so you don't hear it completely clearly, but here it is nonetheless.
Ron said Denver 2 years ago had a tough time. They bounced back. Yeah. You can take that to heart when you look at it. No. Can you put a finger on what happened? Anything Denver did defensively that, I know you've seen them, studied them, pretty much what you had seen on film. Was there anything different you think they put in for this game?
Nothing different.
We sometimes, I know football players don't forget it. We sometimes forget defense.
Evan Mathis, 2014.
No.
That's
So it's not
Anything particular that's memorable? Obviously you're disappointed. You won tremendous games before, and I know you've had some tough losses too. Just on the biggest stage, it's difficult, I know.
Okay, you can't hear everything like you want to, but you get the gist of it. You got to hear Cam with the one-word answers saying, hey, they didn't bring anything different. He didn't even say that much. Just yes, no, what did you take away from what Coach Rivera had to say? Pretty much nothing. I'm not killing him as much for that. Let's look at this thing. This is right after the biggest game of his life. Someone that has, we can say what we want about him. He loves the game. And this was an opportunity for him to get his ultimate goal. Because even though he's won, junior college, he won the NCAA title. When you're a kid, like Cam said, he said right from the beginning when he was young, he wanted to be a football player. And then he started talking about all his hard work that he put into it, which is fine. There's an element of that, and there's an element of, hey, you were created 6'5", and you had some physical tools that it's plenty of people that said they want to be football players and possibly worked as hard, if not harder than Cam. But then there are some guys that are physically gifted as well that didn't put the work in. Anyways, the point is, when you're a little kid and you're envisioning yourself playing football, you might think about winning the Heisman or the NCAA title, but you're thinking about the Super Bowl first and foremost. And so this was his opportunity to be amongst the guys, the football guys, the immortals, if you will, and he came up short. So I'm not killing him as much for that. You would like to see him give a little bit more. He's the leader. Put on that strong face in front of the media because you represent the team. Put up a strong face for your teammates if possible. Behind closed doors, when you're with family and friends, the frustration, the tears, all of those things, I would have preferred that. But the fact that he didn't do it, I'm not killing him. It's minutes after just a horrible situation. And then him walking off, as many of you probably are aware by now, Chris Harris, cornerback from the Denver Broncos, had some things to say, basically answering a question, but looking at Cam Newton saying, hey, we were daring you to throw the ball, yada, yada, yada. I think walking away was a tame thing. I think walking away was the smart thing. I think walking away was something I'm going to give him credit for, because if I just lost the Super Bowl and I've got some 5'9" cornerback, he's supposed to be being interviewed, and he's looking at me, and he's saying, hey, I don't think, me personally, and I'm, the few of you that are listening that know me, I'm not some type of wild, crazy, violent guy by any means. Pretty peaceful, pretty laid back, but after a Super Bowl, to have one of your foes, this little punk who, hey, good player, great player, but to have any of them, especially him, kind of taunting me, I think walking away was the tame thing, and I respect him for doing that. Now, of all the things I have the most issue with is the fumble. I've heard so many different reasons why it happened. He thought that one of the other Panther players was going to get the ball. He's so much trained. Quarterbacks are trained not to fall into that huddle, into that pile for the fumble. You're programmed. It's hard not to. I'm not buying any of it. Personally, I think he pulled up. He made a business decision, as they like to say. I don't care if you think your teammate's going to get that ball. Let him get the ball, and you be right on top of him. This is the Super Bowl. This is an opportunity for you to live and achieve all of your dreams. Okay? You've got the MVP. You've won at the college level. This is the opportunity. All the commercials, the dabbing, the giving the ball to the youngsters, the polarizing figure that you've become, being a sore loser at the beginning, having a complete 180 this year. Everything that you worked for is right in front of you. I don't care how much you've been trained to not go after the ball because you're a quarterback or you think your teammate's going to get it. That, to me, is inexcusable. It's a ball that you just fumbled. You see it in your sight. Why? Why would you stop? I don't care if there were 5 Panthers and 1 Bronco near that ball. I would have been the 6th Panther right there with everyone else, and even if I didn't get it, I would have been in that pile. It's not a business decision. I don't care if I'm a quarterback. I'm leading with my throwing arm if need be. I'm not excusing Cam for that one, okay? I'm not killing him for the press conference, although I wish it would have been a little bit better. Not killing him for that. I'm definitely giving him credit for how he responded to Chris Harris, because I would have taken more objection to what he said. So I'm giving him a pass on both of those. And we know the narrative that he was a sore loser and turned things around, yada, yada, yada. I've never been a huge fan of Cam, but this year I really like kind of the change and the maturation that I've seen from him. But this deal here with that fumble, no, man, I can't give him any slack for that. I don't care how much he's been trained not to fall on the football. Inexcusable, period. There's no, you watch the tape if you want. Okay, I don't care how you're wired, the biggest stage of your life, the football is in front of you that you just fumbled. Dude, you're supposed to be diving on that thing. Time in, time out. I do not care the circumstance, what you've been trained, who do you think is going to end up getting the ball? You got to be in that fray. And if I'm looking at, I don't know, 16 other quarterbacks, the top 16, however you want to word it, how many of them are diving and how many of them are pulling up? I don't know, man. The numbers might not really be in Cam's favor. It might be 15-1. If I extended it to 32 starting quarterbacks in that situation in the Super Bowl, how many would dive for that football? The numbers are not in Cam's favor. It might be 31 or 30 that dove for that football. And so when you have a situation in the Super Bowl where you see heroic things happening, okay? You've got Thomas Davis out there with a spaghetti noodle for an arm, and you go way back to the late 90s, and it's the old man John Elway diving. It wasn't as impressive of a dive as people like, but diving for that touchdown, or was it the first down, and he got hit in midair. You think of these heroics in the Super Bowl. David Tyree, okay? Larry Fitzgerald getting just so close to clinching a Super Bowl for the Cardinals with his heroics. All right, Plexico Burris doing what he did. Santonio Holmes with the great catches. This is off the top of my head. I don't have any notes because it's the Super Bowl, man. This is where people are made. This is the biggest pinnacle. No bigger event if we're talking about professional sports in North America. Kevin Dyson reaching with everything he had, coming just short against the St. Louis Rams. Okay, it's the Super Bowl. We know the Giants, okay, against the Patriots. It is the Super Bowl. All right? Was that Tracy Porter picking off Peyton Manning? You can rattle these things off the top of your head because it's the biggest moment and guys are doing everything they can. Come on, Cam. You want your defining moment. So far, he may make it back. We don't know. You want your defining moment, of the moment people think about you is pulling up because maybe you're a quarterback and you're trained to do that. That's weak sauce, man. You want your defining moment to be pulling up because you think maybe one of your teammates is going to get the ball. Weak sauce. Have a side of it with some chicken or whatever else you want to have. It's weak sauce. Pour it on your French fries. I'm not buying it, okay? It's the Super Bowl. And that's just my spiel on it. It's the biggest game here, and it's the granddaddy of them all. No, not WrestleMania. I'm sorry, Vince McMahon. The granddaddy of them all is the Super Bowl. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the Super Bowl other than the actual game. Sam Wilkinson, try Sam too, one of my followers, one of my faithful listeners, one of my favorite guys to interact with there on Twitter. He had a couple of questions asking about favorite commercial, favorite snack, food to eat. Really good question there because, as we know, the Super Bowl is not just about the game. There are the commercials and this and that. Pretty good commercials this year. They definitely, tried to make a change from last year. Everything was just so sad and serious, and they were trying to be heart-wrenching, pulling at the strings of our heart. Dude, it's a Super Bowl. We bring the funny, baby, and they did better this year. Definitely like the apartments.com commercial. If I had to pick one, it might be that one. I think Jeff Goldblum is a funny guy. I watch a show called Portlandia, and you get to see his comedic side on there. He's been on The League before with the fantasy football sitcom, whatever you want to call it. And it was cool seeing that, him doing the whole Jeffersons thing with Lil Wayne as Wheezy and George Washington as George. So that was a pretty good commercial. I liked the Super Bowl baby commercial. I'm technically not a Super Bowl baby, but technically I am. Now, the Super Bowl baby commercial, remember, there was all these kids that were pretty much born 9 months after the Super Bowl, after a win, for your team. Let's say you're Pittsburgh or you're wherever. And, hey, mom and pop are in a good mood. 9 months later, here you are. You're a Super Bowl baby. If you're born, in late September or in that type of area or range, you might be a Super Bowl baby. Now, technically, by those rules, I'm not a Super Bowl baby. I was not born 9 months roughly after the Super Bowl. I'm a different type of Super Bowl baby. I was born on Super Bowl Sunday, not just on Super Bowl Sunday. I was introduced to the world while the Super Bowl was going on. January 20th, 1985. I'm 31 years old. I was born, and it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday night. In fact, my dad was watching the game. And sure enough, mom's in labor, and I came out quick, they say. I didn't waste any time. I guess I knew even back then it was time for me to get into football. I was born during the Super Bowl. It was the San Francisco 49ers defeating the Miami Dolphins, January 20th, 1985. So I'm technically not a Super Bowl baby. Wasn't born 9 months after the Super Bowl, but I was born not only on Super Bowl Sunday. Yes, kids, the Super Bowl was played in January back in the good old days. I was not only born on Super Bowl Sunday, I was born while the game was being played. I did not waste any time. My mom went in labor in the first quarter, and I was out by the fourth quarter. So I was told, a little young to remember, but I was told as much. And so there you have it. And so I'm a Super Bowl baby in that type of way. Now, we talked about the commercial. The other thing that Sam Wilkinson asked, favorite food. Now, our menu for the Super Bowl this year, we had party subs, which was pretty good. It's a local sub shop around the corner from my place. We went over family's house, sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and my sister joined us, and it was a good time. Smaller crowd, I like that. Sometimes with the big parties, there's so much talking going on. You miss some of the game. This is one of the few times where you care about the commercials, so you don't want too much talking. So it was a small crowd, which I really liked. Our menu, we had some baked ziti, which, we proudly make here in the Jerry Mallory household. We do it right. We try to be healthy, so we do a little turkey ground beef. We do some Italian sausage, some mushroom, spinach, your tomatoes, your onions, your garlic, you season it right, a bunch of different cheeses, ricotta cheese, Parmesan, mozzarella, and it's pretty good. So that was one of the dishes we had, along with the party sub. Had a little bit of chicken, some alcoholic beverages. We had a dump cake, D-U-M-P. I know that does not sound good, but if you look it up, it's really good. A dump cake, you get your crock pot and you just pour some cake batter in there, or cake mix. Then you pour a little egg and some brown sugar and some butter and make whatever type of fruit you want, some peaches, and you just throw it all in there and you hit the on button on your crock pot. I'm sure I'm missing something. You need something to make it kind of watery or juicy, right? Maybe it's the juice from the peaches. I don't know. I didn't make it. The wife made it, but you put it all together and you just sit there and you wait and it comes out, man. It was really good. And so those are the things that we had. But if I'm picking favorite foods, I'm definitely going to pick things that are easy to manage. So you can't go wrong with the sandwich, finger foods. I mean, is there really any topping pizza? No, I love wings. Okay. I love wings. Wings are messy, okay? They get on your fingers, then you got to play with it if you got the bone, I love them, but if I'm just picking the ultimate food, I'm going with a sandwich in second place, and in first place, I'm going with a pizza. Pizza, hey, you grab it. You don't have to look. You've been eating pizza all your life. You just pick up the pizza and you start eating. No thought necessary. You're watching the game or the commercial. You know where your pizza is. You don't even have to look down. You grab it. You take a bite, and you put it back down. So I'm definitely going to go with pizza if I'm giving my number one in terms of foods for the Super Bowl. All right. One more NFL topic, then we'll be getting into the Lions. I mean, this is the end of the year, and it's a perspective. We're looking at this and that, and certainly the Lions will be talked about a little bit later. But it's kind of an NFL/Lions podcast today. Hall of Fame, we know who got in, we know who did not get in, and now it's time for me to give my spiel on Terrell Owens and why I think Terrell Owens, he was screwed, okay? Now, I know there are limitations on the number of people that get in, and he will be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care who hates him, what he did, diva, this, that. The numbers, there's just no way. There's no way he does not get in. But he should have been a first ballot Hall of Famer in my book. Now, no disrespect to Kenny Stabler. I feel like he should have been a Hall of Famer already, And so now that he's passed, you put him in. Well, he's not here to appreciate it. He's not here to accept the award, although his family is, and I'm happy for them. I feel like he should have been in already. And so if you want to wait till he passes, then they could have waited to 2017's induction if there's a numbers reason as to why Terrell Owens was not a first ballot Hall of Famer. The numbers speak for themselves, guys, okay? Say what you want about him being a diva, being this, being that, 1,078 receptions, 15,934 receiving yards, touchdowns. Come on, man. 153 receiving touchdowns. Are you serious? 153 receiving touchdowns. I mean, the records are all there, okay? That puts him second all-time in yards, sixth in catches, and third all-time in receiving touchdowns. The dude should have been a Hall of Famer. I don't care about your personal opinions of him. I don't care about any of that. Dude's a Hall of Famer. I think he got screwed. I think he should have got in. You compare him to this or that player. For instance, you've got Marvin Harrison, who also I think is a Hall of Famer, okay? But I'm going to say Mr. Owens, his stats are just a little bit better. Now, they're really close. Now, receiving, Harrison has the slight advantage, 1,102. Then you have receiving yards, 14,580. Not as much as Mr. Terrell Owens. I want to say Terrell Lawson, thinking about our D coordinator. And then receiving TDs, you got 128. As we know, Mr. Owens surpasses him in that. Now, we want to talk about the reasons why T.O. didn't get in. Some of it has to do with, or a lot of it has to do with off the field. I'm not here to sully Marvin Harrison's name, but if you look at some things he was involved with, potentially being a murderer outside of football, I know Terrell Owens isn't a model citizen, but hey, if we're going based off of things outside of the field, T.O. has had more bad press, but you can just look it up yourself. Marvin Harrison, I would definitely say, has more of a spotty situation in terms of legal things than Terrell Owens did. Now, the next question is Calvin Johnson, and this is something that has been asked and has been talked about. Will the requirements for the Hall of Fame have to be modified or changed? Because now guys are leaving early. Marshawn Lynch, 30 years old, hanging them up. Calvin, more and more likely, is looking like he's going to retire, and it's really the next topic that we're gonna touch on. Because last show, like I said, the news hit while I was recording, so I'll give my spiel on it. And certainly, if the news ever becomes confirmed, whether he's staying for one more year or leaving, we'll have a special edition podcast. But guys are retiring sooner now. So do you kind of look at the average? The average amount of touchdowns they had per year, and yards, et cetera, et cetera. Calvin has 731 receptions, 11,619 receiving yards, and 83 touchdowns. I mean, really good numbers. Are they Hall of Fame worthy? I think with guys retiring sooner, with the number of years that it took him to do this, the different Lions records that he has, where he ranks in the NFL in so many different statistical categories, whether it be single season or, if you take the average, yeah, I think he does get in. It's close because the numbers aren't as gaudy because he's not probably going to play as long, but you still have to give him, in my opinion, the credit. You have to give him the nod. And if it were up to me, I would say Calvin Johnson, yes, he is a Hall of Famer. So let's talk about this. Like I said, I was sitting there doing the show last week. After it was all over, I go to Twitter and I go to, different places I go to get my news and whatnot. And Calvin Johnson is like, he's retiring. That's the first thing I saw. Like, it was official. I'm like, whoa, okay, let's look at this. Then I see that, not that it's 100% official, but yeah, he told Schwartz. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm sure he told Jim Schwartz that he was retiring. He told Caldwell and Stafford and Tulloch that those were his intentions. And all signs are pointing toward that. And as more reports come out, the body is beat down. He's having this issue. He's having that issue. People are questioning whether or not, it's the Lions doing this to him, or if it's, him not wanting to take a pay cut, or if it's, there's so many things, but I really think it comes down to that body, man. And he has been beat down, bruised, and battered. And I think because of that, it's taken its toll. And sure enough, man, he's at the point in his career where he's got a nice amount of money. He's got, the records, doesn't have the individual success, but, hey, I think he's hanging them up for those reasons more so than it being the Lions. And so it's interesting because there's been a lot of hate toward the Detroit Lions during the Super Bowl, man. You got Deion Sanders and you got Michael Irvin, Mr. Playmaker, coming out and just a lot of hate, a lot of disrespectful things toward the Lions and toward Stafford. Chris Roberts, at Chris Roberts Detroit on Twitter, he asked this question for this show. He said, how do you feel about national media ripping Stafford this week? So we're going to talk about Stafford in just a second. But since we were already talking about Calvin, let's talk about what Michael Irvin had to say about Calvin. And not so much what he had to say about Calvin, but his opinion of the Lions and why this may be another player that's going to be leaving because of the Lions organization. Now, I don't have this soundbite, so I'm going to do my best Michael Irvin impersonation. Forgive me if it's not that strong, but I'm going to just go ahead and read what was out there on MLive, what he had to say about the Detroit Lions, mixing us with the Cleveland Browns, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, here we go. This is my best playmaker. You know what, man? It blows my mind that the two greatest to ever have played our game played in Detroit. And and they walk away when they still had stuff left in them, man. I just don't understand it. Then he goes on to say, that must be such a tough thing to wake up every day and to go to work in Detroit. Look at what's around you. And then you're doing what you're doing and they're not winning games. It must be a tough thing. I think it would only happen in Cleveland, but I see it's happening in Detroit. All right, forgive me for that impersonation, not the best, but you get the gist. And so I'm like, man, the Cleveland Browns, the Lions have been bad, but this iteration of the Browns that have just been, there's horrible, there's what the Lions have done, and then there's brown. There's Cleveland brown, okay? The color of your excrement is what they have been. I just don't agree with the narrative. You know, Barry Sanders, maybe there were certain things, him wanting to play somewhere else, but if he really wanted to play football that bad, things would have been made. Things would have been made to where he could have got traded. Something would have happened. You know, the whole, he went to play in Miami. Yeah, there's probably a portion of him that just didn't want to play in Detroit, but there was a big portion that just said, I don't want to play football, period. We already know, if you talk to those that were around that time, that Barry, you know, he just happened to be one of the most gifted athletes of all time. And so football was what he played. But did he love the game? Did he eat, sleep, and breathe it like some of these guys? Was he obsessed with it growing up? No. And it seems as though he appreciates the game now more than he did back then. From a historical standpoint, from, you know, even the Lions, you know, he seems to be more involved and active with them now than he was even back then. And so I don't think it's this whole Detroit drove him out of town. We know there are issues. They got rid of, I can't think of the offensive line off the top of my head. I know that didn't sit well with him. And then Bobby Ross and trying to institute the fullback. There's an element of the Lions to it, but I think by and large it was him not wanting to play football. With Calvin, maybe there is an element to it. But I think if he truly wants to play, he can play next year. I don't think Bob Quinn would want him to be playing at the contract anyway, so he could easily say, I'm not taking a pay cut, at which point he'll be cut, and then he can sign with another team. Him playing on another team is quite easy. And so the fact that he's just talking about retiring altogether, walking away from the millions, to me says it's the body. It's not this whole narrative that Detroit just beats you down. Oh man, it must be so tough playing for the Detroit. It must be like Cleveland. Dude, I'm not going to sit here and talk about Michael Irvin and the White House and all that yada, yada, yada. I'm just going to say this. It's easy to look at something and it fits a narrative and it's a hot take because, hey, I'm talking about it, not that I really matter, but you got this on M Live and you hear it on this news piece and that news piece. Sometimes guys go fishing and sometimes we take the bait, and that's fine, but just look a little bit deeper. All right, playmakers, you got to look a little bit deeper, man. Maybe Calvin Johnson is just really beat down. Maybe his body is just hurt, Michael. Maybe Barry Sanders just didn't love football anymore, and he wanted to play 10 years the whole time, and 10 years came, and he retired, man. You just got to think about it in more than one way. It's so easy to say, oh, Detroit runs its athletes out of town. You know, I'm not buying that. It's a weak take. It's weak sauce, just like the Cam Newton weak sauce for the Super Bowl thing. I've got another helping. You can put this on your mashed potatoes, Michael. You can put it, wherever on your greens. If you want to put it on whatever type of food that you enjoy, if you want to put it on a baked potato, I have a big helping of weak sauce that you can pour all over your steak, whatever you want to do, Mr. Playmaker. All right, guys, we're going to take a break. When we come back, yes, as it was mentioned, a lot of hate toward Matthew Stafford. We'll be talking about that. We also have a little bit to talk about in terms of the offseason. It's right around the corner, some draft prospects, et cetera, et cetera. So stay right here as we'll return on the Hindsight 20 podcast. Jerry Malley here for the Hindsight 20 podcast. It's simple. Your ad can be placed right here if you want to do some business with myself and the Detroit Sports Podcast Network as a whole. Leave an email, hindsight20podcast@gmail.com. Your ad can be placed right here on this show, maybe a time or two. And when the listeners hear this, I have a trusting voice. If I promote your company, if I say it's good, I try it out, I like it, they'll give it a shot too. Hindsight20podcast@gmail.com. Let's make it happen. All right, we're back on the Hindsight 20. That was Sam Spence, as we mentioned, leaving us. But his songs and his music, well, they won't be leaving us. They'll always be there for us to enjoy. One of the classic songs by Mr. Sam Spence. So before we get into the Stafford hate, I had one more little piece, a question I want to talk about. It doesn't take too long to answer, but I really do like it. It's from Cookie991 on Twitter asks, why is the NFL so against gambling? It's almost encouraged over here in the UK. Only responsibly, of course. So, hey, welcome from across the pond. Hope you enjoy your tea and crumpets, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit. It's funny that you mentioned that the NFL is against gambling because that is the narrative. That's what they like to say. But I'm going to put it in a category with a few things. Season tickets to the Cleveland Browns, 2016. A Johnny Manziel jersey. A Titus Young jersey. Opinion from the NFL that they don't want us to gamble on football. All of those things fit in the following category. It's out there, but I'm not buying it, okay? Yes, the NFL does not supposedly encourage gambling. Well, there's an issue with that because the one thing the NFL does encourage quite a bit is us spending money on the NFL. And with your FanDuels and your DraftKings and fantasy football, the NFL is king. The interest in these games, people watching games that they don't care anything about. They'll watch the Buffalo Bills against the Tennessee Titans. Why? Because they have Marcus Mariota on their FanDuel roster. They'll watch the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Kansas City Chiefs, caring nothing about the teams. Why? Because they have Travis Kelce in their work fantasy league in which they put down $100 and trying to win $500. You get my point here? The revenue, the extra amount of interest that the NFL generates from gambling is substantial. It's a reason why the NFL Network has fantasy football shows, and they have podcasts, and all over the website, it's fantasy this and fantasy that. It's not for free leagues. I'm in a few free leagues, but most people aren't. It's because of gambling. And so, yes, gambling on the games specifically is supposedly frowned upon. Well, that's what they want you to believe. But gambling in the realm of football as a whole, I guarantee you, is strongly encouraged. They love it. It brings them money. It brings them attention. It brings ratings. You know, you're watching games you would never think about watching. So that is a win-win for them. They love the fact that money is exchanged between entities when a guy like Peyton Manning is on your FanDuel, when a guy like Marshawn Lynch is on your DraftKings. So they may say they don't encourage gambling and they don't want it or promote it. But like I said, it's like that Titus Young jersey. I'm just not buying it. Okay, back to the Lions. Like we said, Chris Roberts, DET, he said, how do you feel about the national media ripping on Stafford this week? Well, I had a few opinions about it on Twitter. Some people agreed with me, and I'm not a fan of it. I'll start off with that. We heard what Deion Sanders said, thinking Stafford should take a pay cut instead of Calvin, basically dogging out Stafford. Let's go back to a clip. This is after, I want to say, the Arizona Cardinals game. Stafford gets benched, and Deion, he's starting off his narrative on Stafford that he continues a few months later down to Radio Row, Super Bowl week. Let's take a listen.
How do we keep getting to this point when we're paying these average quarterbacks, 5 years, $76 million? Then quite a few of them are making $100 million now. I never talk about a man money until his game get funny. His game is past funny. His game is so past funny. Since 2011, only Eli Manning has thrown more picks, and that's saying a lot. 72 to 73. Stafford has time. He will catch Eli, I promise you, with the 3 today. But his game is so funny, we're not even mentioning Calvin Johnson amongst the best receivers in the league anymore. He's not even being mentioned. Why? Can he not run anymore? Can he not catch anymore? No, because of his quarterback.
All right, I don't even want to hear any more of this. Let's tackle the first statement first. We're not mentioning Calvin Johnson as being one of the best receivers anymore. Why? Because of Matthew Stafford? No. And I don't want to turn this into a Calvin versus Stafford. I love them both. They're my Lions. But there is an element where you do have to compare the two. Calvin isn't being mentioned as one of the best receivers in the game anymore because Calvin Johnson is no longer one of the best receivers in the NFL anymore. Nothing to do with Matthew Stafford, okay? If you watch the games, instead of the highlights, instead of, just watching your Patriots and your Cowboys, how many games have you actually sat down and watched of the Detroit Lions, Deion? Riddle me that, Mr. Prime Time, Mr. Must Be the Money. You don't talk about someone's money until their money is funny. Like, whatever that meant, a little cute line. Maybe he's trying to become a rapper again. If you don't know about his history as a rapper, oh, please do yourself a favor. YouTube Deion Sanders. Oh, he was down with MC Hammer and he had the chains and he had a song, Must Be the Money. And it was all about the money. Just like in his career, it was all about him. It was all about prime time. It was the gold chain. But now he gives a caveat to where, yes, I can talk about people's money. Calvin is not the receiver that he used to be because of Stafford. So you're saying Stafford is worse in year 3 than he was this past year? It just doesn't make sense. You can say what you want about Stafford versus Calvin. And yes, Stafford has had the luxury of having a great receiver, and it has helped him. But dude, let's be real. Calvin ain't running past people like he used to. He isn't blowing by them, jumping over them. He's a good receiver, but he's not what he used to be. And so this whole narrative of Stafford holding him back, it's not the case, because Stafford's still putting up pretty good numbers, and it's easy to bash him after he got benched after, 0-5 because he looked bad. And many of us was kind of dogging him out. Well, we see how he turned things around, and it was not just throwing the ball up to Calvin like he used to. We can look at 2014 where Calvin was out for 3 games and we went 3-0 and we had some key victories. Years ago, yes, Stafford used Calvin as a crutch, but who wouldn't? Like I said on Twitter, it would be like faulting John Stockton and saying, oh, his assists are bloated and, they don't really mean as much because he threw the ball to Karl Malone too much. I mean, what do you expect Stafford to do? 3-4 years ago, who would not have thrown the ball numerous times to Calvin, tossed it up to him, forced the ball to him? Like Tri Sam said, man, I love the point he took. It's like you can't win. It's either Calvin is getting the ball thrown to him too much, Stafford's relying on him too much, and that's all he can rely on, or he's not getting the ball enough. Like, which one is it? So this guy, Mr. Must Be the Money, Deion Sanders, he goes and says, Stafford is a number of guys that's getting paid too much. Well, let's take a look at this, because the way he worded this, you would think that, Stafford's what? The number one, money-getting quarterback in the league? No, he's not number one. What about top 5? He must be top 5 in salary, right? No, not top 5. Okay, Jerry, what about top 10? Stafford surely is one of the 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the league. The way Deion Sanders is mentioning it, he's acting like he's the highest paid player in all of professional sports. No, Stafford is not the 10th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. You got to go all the way down to number 14. Stafford is the 14th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Now, in my opinion, there are not 13 quarterbacks in the NFL better than Matthew Stafford. One thing you have to even consider is some of these rookie deals. When you consider the rookie deals, guys that are due to get paid, it's even worse. Like an Andrew Luck, he's going to get paid. Maybe he is better than Stafford, but he's not really part of the equation. And so that just makes it even more abundant that the 13 guys ahead of Stafford are surely not better than him, although several of them are making more money. You have to factor in a guy like Tom Brady, who took the huge pay cut, only making $9 million this year. Makes it even worse of a point that there aren't 13 other guys better than Matthew Stafford, although he's the 14th highest paid. So, Jerry, who are some of the guys ahead of Stafford? Well, you got Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger, Cam Newton. Yeah, those guys are better than Stafford. Then it starts getting shaky, because you've got Matt Ryan making $20.7 million a year. I'm not putting him above Stafford. Sorry, just not doing it. Joe Flacco, same deal, not doing it. Drew Brees, he's older. Maybe you can debate it. For me, if I'm going into the 2016 season, call me a homer, give me Stafford. Ryan Tannehill at 10. Colin Kaepernick at 11. Jay Cutler at 12. Romo, okay, you can argue it. He's been injured, though. And then there's Stafford at 14, making $17.6 million. You see my point? In saying that Calvin should not be getting a pay cut, but Stafford should. Now, on the flip side, Calvin, in terms of money, is number 1 in terms of receivers. He's making more money than Julio Jones, Antonio Brown. He's making more money than A.J. Green or Demaryius Thomas. He's not better than those guys anymore. So whereas Calvin is number 1 in terms of money, but if we're ranking him in receivers, he's probably 7 or 8 now, as opposed to Stafford, who's like 14th in money. But if we were ranking him, I'd probably put him at about 10 or 11. Don't need a calculator. You don't either. Dion, you do the math, okay? I know you got your hot takes and you got your opinions, and, they got the players they like, the players they don't like. To me, it's weak. Again, I have a big heaping helping of weak sauce. I bought a huge bottle, family size. I had some for your buddy Michael Irvin. I had some for Cam Newton. I've got some for you. Maybe you're on a diet. You've got some baked fish and some broccoli. Weak sauce goes good with it as well. And by the way, you're trying to teach Darius Slay. You're trying to train him. You're working with him. Great. I hope you're working with him in coverage. Slay, if you're listening, anything Deion Sanders has to say about tackling, do the exact opposite, because that guy avoided contact like a newborn baby avoiding vegetables. Okay, bad parallel. You get my point. The dude did not like contact. He did not like to tackle. So Slay, listen to his coverage ability skills. Listen to, ball hawking and playmaking ability skills and speech. When it comes to tackling, whatever he tells you, do the opposite. Instead, remember Mr. Rod Woodson that you learned from a couple of seasons ago? Do yourself a favor and listen to him. Because Mr. Neon Dion, Mr. Must Be the Money, dude did not like to tackle. And so, the hate, and you had Michael Irvin saying Stafford was basically Jay Cutler. I'm like, it was a lot this week, and a lot of bashing of Detroit. And hey, I was sick of hearing it. So that's my spiel on that. Before we get out of here, we're starting to see some mock drafts, and they're talking about Sheldon Rankin. The tide is shifting. Now I'm starting to worry, will he even be available to the Detroit Lions at 16? I'm not saying he's surefire the guy I would want, but if he has a big combine, Sheldon Rankins, who is defensive tackle from Louisville, however you want to say it, the whole narrative of Aaron Donald, the comparisons, what he did at the combine practices, it's all there. And so now, maybe 16, you won't get a chance to even get him. Thankfully, it's a very deep class of defensive tackles, and even if you don't get him, there are some other opportunities and other options. Now, certainly, he's a guy that is more suited for the 4-3, and so you're looking at teams that might be picking, because I don't think he'll go higher than 7 or 8. So let's just say if we start at 7, how many teams, A, need a defensive tackle, and B, run the 4-3? So I'm on one of my favorite websites right now. I'm literally scrolling as I'm looking. You got San Francisco. Well, they've got Chip Kelly. We don't know what they're going to run. Don't think they'll be taking a D tackle with their first pick this year. They need a quarterback. They could use another receiver, et cetera, et cetera. You've got the Miami Dolphins. What? You want to pair Sue with Sheldon Rankins? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they considered it, and so that's one potential landing spot for him. I just think there will be some better players, potentially like a Miles Jack or, maybe Emmanuel Ogba, who's rated a little bit higher that I can see them going after. Tampa Bay, they also do a little 4-3. They've got Gerald McCoy. That's a possibility. That's a possibility there. At number 10, you got the New York Giants. Again, all of these guys, they run a little bit of 4-3, and a guy like Sheldon Rankins could fit their need. Chicago Bears, they're more of a 3-4 now under John Fox, so I don't think they would look in that direction. New Orleans Saints, that's a possibility as well. So there's quite a few players. Now, it all depends on if Sheldon Rankins is the first 4-3 D tackle off the board. You still got Ashawn Robinson. You got Andrew Billings. You got Philadelphia Eagles at 13. We got to wait and see what they want to do. The Raiders. And then you've got at 15 the Los Angeles Rams. They got Aaron Donald. They've got Michael Brockers, who they had to make a decision on, as well as making a decision on Nick Fairley. I don't know, man. I'm really liking this Rankins kid. I'm trying to temper my expectations. I don't want to go full on like, hey, we got to get this guy. He might not even be available. Seriously, if he blows it up at this combine and he puts up Aaron Donald type combine measurables, he might be gone before we even get a chance to pick at 16. All right, guys, we talked a lot of NFL today, but we still squeezed in our Lions. We definitely had to make some defenses, some defending statements, because guys like the playmaker Michael Irvin and Mr. Primetime Deion Sanders kind of talking too much trash, so we had to defend our boys. We talked Super Bowl. We talked Sheldon Rankins. Before you know it, It's going to be free agency time, then the draft. Lots of fun here at the Hindsight 20 podcast. I want to thank each and every one of you, as always, for listening. We'll be back next Monday talking more Detroit Lions goodness as the news hits. If anything substantial with Calvin comes out, we'll do a special edition before that. But until then, this is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network's own Hindsight 20. It's not just me. You've got the Doc and Jock. You've got Tigers. Hey, baseball's right around the corner. We've got fantasy. We even do a Pistons podcast hosted by myself and Kevin Evans. That'll be out this Saturday. Plenty to talk about in the world of sports. Here's the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter, Jerry Mallory NFL. Until next Monday, thank you for listening, and we are gone.